button here, which I think means we'll be starting to record. That's exciting. Hello everyone. Welcome to Rail Natter this evening. Except that it isn't the evening; it's 10 a.m. and it's a month before this is going to go out. But you all don't need to know that. It's fine. It's fine. I'm pleased to say with us today we have Richard Long. Richard, hello, hello.
Hello.
That's an excellent bit of shelf background there. People always like to judge people on their kind of Skype backgrounds,
Yeah.
but I can see a lot of goodies in there. Not least a TARDIS and a Ryde rail mug. There's
Yeah.
some solid stuff. Excellent. How's lockdown treating you? Mixed bag.
Yeah, mixed bag. Yeah, I mean, I as a full-time parent, I'm quite used to being at home on my own, so I had to put up with several months of everyone being here.
Yeah. This evening. It's morning. It's confusing. I'm drinking from an old. I used to drink every rail now. I used to have this, and I stopped. I started drinking kombucha and beer, but now I'm gonna have a cup of tea again. So today we are talking about. Let's go small faces. We're talking about. Well, this is the name that I've given this episode, and I hope you don't mind. I've called it the Island of Tube Trains because
Okay.
it is the Isle of Wight is an interesting one, isn't it? So I don't know a huge amount about the Isle of Wight. I've never been to the Isle of Wight. The most I know about the Isle of Wight is that it's got lots of former radar stations on it. That's
Yeah.
about the extent of my knowledge, to be honest, and also that it's a good place to show what gauge clearance analysis looks like. Those are my two kind of bits of knowledge about the Isle of Wight. So I'm looking forward to learning a bit more. We're going to cover a few bits and pieces. So I think we might as well get started. I think. Welcome to this evening's Rail Natter. There it is, the lovely Intercity 225, fading away. Oh, people often ask why on earth I've got that particular mixture of trains in the intro video to this, and it's because these are the things that bounce around in my head. The Intercity 225 in that livery was like the train or rather, actually, it was a HST in that livery. It was like the big, exciting train to the rest of the world that I grew up with. I grew up in Inverurie, north of Aberdeen. So when I'd go into Aberdeen, every now and then there'd be an Intercity liveried HST. And then all the sort of mixed feely, sort of stagecoachy intercity ScotRail 158s hanging around. That's pretty much my childhood. Whereas a lot of people have a slightly more kind of nostalgic childhood of steam trains or indeed like diesel bubble cars and things. But no, for me it's the HST looking a bit grubby and a load of 158s. It's not quite as anyway. So Richard, thanks for joining us. So we're going to talk about. Firstly, tell what. So why are you particularly interested in the history of trains on the Isle of Wight? What got you into the subject? Is it because of where you live by any chance?
I never lived on the Isle of Wight, but I come from near the Isle of Wight. I come from near Portsmouth, but my grandparents lived on the Isle of Wight.
Ah, okay.
So I spent all my childhood holidays on the island. And inevitably, as I became a railway enthusiast, I loved the Isle of Wight anyway, and as I became a railway enthusiast, I realised the island's trains were particularly fascinating.
Yeah. So if I was to, so as I say, I don't know much about the Isle of Wight at all, so I'm looking forward to learning plenty from this one. So if I bring our little small faces up, you've sent me a load of pictures which are going to annotate the story that you're going to tell us. This image is beautiful for starters.
Yes, it is.
It's lovely, isn't it? So we've got. Is this Ryde Pier?
That is Ryde Pier, yeah. This was a drone shot. This was taken by a company called Aerial View. It's the photo off the back of my book. So if you're looking at that picture, the pierhead would be on the right of the picture, and the esplanade would be on the left. You can see there that Ryde Pier is actually three separate piers. There's the Promenade Pier furthest away from us, which is used by pedestrians and cars. Then there's derelict tramway pier in the middle that was last used in 1969. So Promenade Pier was the one built first, then the tramway pier, and then finally you've got the railway pier nearest to us.
Ah, okay.
And nearest to us of all is the second track on the railway pier, which is no longer used.
Ah, so they're just out and back on that one, do they? I see. It's I mean, it's such a remarkable image, and there's so much history just in this little image. Not least also with the lovely turquoise sea. But
Yeah, it's
how
beautiful.
long is the pier?
I should know that. I can't remember.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
I should have checked.
By the magic of length of
Yes,
Ryde
it's quite a long one.
pier, 681 meters. That's hefty. And
Yes.
it also looks hilarious on the map because it really is quite a substantial sticky outy. I mean, it's the sort of thing that if you zoom out and have the whole of the Isle of Wight in the picture, which by the magic of this I can do. There we are.
Okay. Yeah.
And there we go. You can see. I mean, the pier is huge.
Yes.
It's quite something.
I think the tide goes out a very long way at Ryde, and obviously the pier is how the boats how the passengers off the boat get to the island. So hence they need such a long pier, and hence there's so much transport infrastructure.
Yeah, yeah, it's absolutely. And there it is whizzing along out to the little terminal station. It's fantastic. It's an interesting. It's just, I mean, as a kind of an eccentric infrastructure interested person, it really is a very interesting little feature that. So anyway, back to the picture. So and I'm noticing that this train here doesn't look like it looks somewhat out of place. I mean, for a variety of reasons. One of them, it looks very short.
Yes.
For the sort of length of formation I'm used to with this sort of stock. And secondly, it appears to not be attached to the London Underground system, which again you'd expect
very well
this particular
spotted,
stock to be. Yeah. So tell us about what is this train doing? Why is it here?
Well,
or shall we wait until the appropriate moment?
maybe wait. I put this one first just as a
tease.
good snapshot of what the island's railways look like now, because obviously it's not what they always looked like, and it's not what they will look like next year.
Okay. Oh, well, indeed, so we've got.
It's interesting you mentioned the length of the train, because as recently as the 1980s, they would have been running 7-car trains in the summer.
Really?
Yeah, and up until the mid 80s. The 38 stock, which arrived from 89 onwards, they only ever ran in 2 or 4-car formations. But these days, they to be honest, haven't got enough working units to run 4-car
So they've
sets.
been degrading sufficiently
Yeah.
which I'm sure we'll get. Steer me if I start going on to things that you're going to cover astutely later on with the images. So
No, that's fine.
let me know if you want to move on as well. So this is so it's a fantastic picture. I almost don't want to move away from it because it's such a nice, fantastic image. I just love it. But we shall do precisely that, which is
Okay.
whiz on to the next one, which is a fantastic railway clearinghouse map of the Isle of Wight.
Indeed.
Good grief, there's a lot of railway on here.
That's the island at its peak mileage. That was 55 miles, which is how it was between 1900 and 1952. As is often the case, the last line to open was the first line to close.
Yeah.
And the colours on that map, if you can see them on the screen, shows the ownership of the lines immediately prior to grouping. So on the west of the island, you've got the Freshwater Yarmouth Newport Railway, which was such a small company, it only had 2 locomotives. And then all the red lines in the middle are the Isle of Wight Central Railway. And then on the east of the map, you've got the Isle of Wight Railway, which is the Ryde to Shanklin and Ventnor line mainly. And you'll note that in Ryde itself, Ryde St John's to the pierhead is a different colour. That was actually built and owned by the mainland companies, the LSWR and the LBSCR, but it was operated by the island companies.
Yeah, I see. So that fed into St John's Road Junction Station.
That's right, because essentially the original Ryde to Ventnor line only went as far north as St John's, which was a bit of a problem for people arriving at the pierhead on a boat. And the boats were jointly owned by the mainland companies as well, so they were obviously delivering passengers to the island. They arrived at the pierhead, and one stage the pier tramway was extended all the way to St John's, where there was an end-on junction, but there was no through running, so people still had to change at St John's.
Yeah.
The island companies couldn't afford to extend through Ryde, so eventually the mainland companies paid for it instead.
Yeah.
Built the famous tunnel and the railway pier.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing that strikes me immediately looking at this is that it feels like a real island of Sodor.
Yes,
Because
yeah, I was going to say that. Yes,
it really, it's like all these little railways weaving around with their own little companies and going to these kind of quite impressively named settlements on the Isle of Wight. And the Isle of Wight isn't. I mean, it's a big lump, but it's still quite a small island.
Yeah,
So,
it's 23 miles across.
yeah. So how did it justify this number of railways? Was there a particular interest in it?
Yeah, I'm not sure it did really. From a most of them never made any money. But that's just the late 19th century railway expansion. I think people kept proposing new railways, and sooner or later someone built them.
Yeah, yeah. I'm bringing our faces back. I've had our faces switched off so we can see the top corner, so people can see where the connection to the mainland is. But I'll bring us back. Yeah. So it is a fantastic little map. I mean, it's Newport. I mean, how big is Newport as a settlement? Is it? As in roughly, it's not. I mean, they're not huge places, but equally,
no, it's not.
Compared to Ventnor, is it?
Yeah, Newport is the county town, but I think Ryde is the biggest town on the island, as far as I'm aware. And obviously, the big tourist resorts are sort of down the east coast, and down in Shanklin.
Yeah, yeah. So of the railways that we see here. Only one is retained as a mainline railway, but they haven't all disappeared entirely, have they?
No. So part of the line between Ryde and Newport is now the steam railway. That runs as far as Wootton.
Ah, okay, yeah. So does that come into St John's Road Junction, or is it sort of isolated?
No, they would like to one day, but that's not happening at the moment. There's a junction at Smallbrook Junction. There's a station there.
Ah, okay, yeah.
Originally, there wasn't. Pre Heritage Days, there was no station at Smallbrook Junction, but they don't have through running powers. So Network South East built a station at Smallbrook Junction.
Ah, I see. Yeah. Anyway, So this. I suppose I've not really described. So it's a railway clearinghouse map, and you've got 4 different railway company colours on the various lines, and kind of a fairly sprawling little network. You've got Isle of Wight station and Town station down at Ventnor, and the south of the island. 2 stations at
Ventnor, yeah.
Yeah.
But the other line to Ventnor was the last to be built and the first to close.
Really? So presumably it was a better quality bit of railway as well, despite and it closed, or is that perhaps not true?
No, probably not. It didn't go. It wasn't as convenient for Ventnor itself, arguably. Although it was not as high as the original Ventnor. The original Ventnor station is 300 feet above sea level. Almost. The other one's a bit lower, but on the outskirts.
And there's a very weavy little railway that goes from Newport to Freshwater, which looks intriguing if nothing else. Goes past the castle and sort of whizzes along towards Yarmouth, Isle of Wight, Yarmouth, and to the ferry. So there is a ferry, seemingly at Yarmouth. There is a ferry across to Lymington.
There still is, yeah. It's a bit of a walk. It would have been a bit of a walk at Yarmouth from the ferry to the station, though. More so than at Cowes, where there was also a bit of a walk. But at Ryde, of course, you get off the ferry straight onto the train. Which,
unbeatable. Hence you can see that's clearly the main sort of the main connection. Even then, it looks like it is.
The ferry from Yarmouth goes to Lymington on the mainland, and at Lymington, the branch line to the ferry is still there. You can get straight off the train and onto the ferry. So it's interesting that.
Which of the ferries still exist? So there's obviously Ryde has got all the fast connections, but is there do the ferries exist into Cowes and Yarmouth? Yeah. Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, they all do, yeah. And there's also now from Ryde, there's also the hovercraft that goes to Southsea, and also from Fishbourne near Ryde, car ferry goes to Portsmouth.
Ah, okay. Right, okay. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. A bit of the country I very much have not explored and need to. Maybe the festival will be the excuse. In any case, fantastic. Right, okay. Shall we whiz to the next slide? Yeah. So, lovely. Here we go. We have we're facing a little steam locomotive. Which is very cleanly burning, actually, with a set of lovely 2-axle coaches by the look of it behind.
They're bogey coaches.
Oh, are they? Oh,
yeah, those are the bogey coaches.
oh, they are bogey
So
coaches. Oh, lovely.
so
Yeah.
I took this photo. I'm very pleased with this one. This is on the steam railway, obviously, and this is literally what the trains would have been like in the decades immediately prior to electrification. This is just approaching Ashley here. So it's coming from the Ryde direction. It's obviously only coming from as far as Smallbrook, but and you can tell it's facing away from Ryde because it's facing towards you. The loco's always facing
okay, towards Ryde.
No turntables.
Yeah, no runaround, or rather, no way to spin it about. So
No.
yeah, it's quite a sizable consist there. What's that? 4 coaches, 4 or 5 coaches maybe? I can't quite tell.
Looks like at least 4. Yeah. They've got a good stock of coaches.
Now, heads out of windows in all of them, so there's a decent chance there's a lot of people in the train. Yeah,
it was a big weekend for them actually. This is their flagship loco. This is W24 Cowbourne, and this is about 10 years ago, but this is when she was launched back into service after an overhaul that lasted 10 years or more. So this was a big weekend.
So is this steam locomotive, was it native to the line? Was it one that did run at the time, or was it contemporary to...
Yeah, I mean, inevitably for the Isle of Wight, it was second-hand originally. It's ex-LSWR, but yeah, the Southern brought this loco and locos of this type to the island from the 1920s onwards, and by the 50s there were only 2 classes of loco on the island. This was the main one, and by the 60s this was the only class of loco on the island, and this is the only survivor.
Oh, really?
This is Adams 02 class. This is
lovely. So
this was also the first loco preserved by the Wight Locomotive Society, who went on to become the steam railway. So it's a very special loco.
So it's a very special loco for them. Yeah. Did any modifications have to be done to the locomotive when it arrived onto the island back in whenever the LSWR shipped it across?
No, not those ones. No.
Were they stubby enough that they could fit where they needed to?
Yes. Yeah. As you can see, it's a lot bigger than a tube train.
Yeah. That's lovely. It is lovely. So you've got several coaches looking very nice. It's a nicely maintained bit of track as well. I might point out. It's looking in good nick. There's some drainage there as well, which is positive. It's all very good vegetation management. I mean, it's good. It's very good. Oh, lovely. Shall we flick to the next image, or is there anything else in particular? It's a nice image.
No, yeah. Let's move on. Yeah.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah.
So some absolutely smashing bit of early British Rail corporate identity advertising. So it's still got the dark boxes around the logos. So I'm assuming this is sort of. Oh, in fact, it's got the date on it. I was going to say mid '60s, so it's 67. Yeah.
Yes. So this is the launch of the electrification with what was the standard stock tube trains, which were built from the early 20s till the early 30s, and this was the point at which just the Ryde to Shanklin line was left. Beeching Report had originally proposed closing everything except the line up pier. There was a lot of opposition to that. Mainly, I think it was felt that the tourist industry would suffer, and the island was very dependent on the tourist industry. In the end, nobody seemed too bothered about the Newport to Cowes line, because most of the tourists travelled down the Shanklin line. And in the end, the campaign was very much to save the Ryde line all the way through to Ventnor, but in the end, it was just reprieved as far as Shanklin.
So it's so it doesn't run so it no longer runs to Ventnor. That.
No.
Okay.
No.
So it's severed at Shanklin. See, this is how little I know. I'm learning lots. Yeah. Okay.
You'll see that leaflet says bus connections.
Bus connections to Ventnor.
Yeah. There's a logo for the local bus company at the bottom as well, Southern Vectors.
So it was very much tourism that drove the retention of drove the shape of the extant railway system on the island.
It's one of those routes where probably quite quiet most of the year, but for a few weeks in the summer, especially on Saturdays, it was very, very busy. And it was felt that the roads wouldn't cope, the buses wouldn't cope, and also the car ferries in those days had a lot less capacity. So even if people had wanted to bring their cars, there was
they'd be queuing at each end for a long time.
They just never get over.
Yeah, I see. So this it's a lovely kind of a light blue, this advert, and it's got that vivid image of a very sort of back when the tube trains had quite a sort of US look to them. I think there's still an influence of some of the original design cues from when
yeah.
So, but I can just about in the faded blue see a BR logo on the side of the on the side of there. So were these painted in BR blue with the?
Yes, they were. Yes, that leaflet makes it look like it hasn't got a yellow end, but it would have done. Yes, that's just a quirk of the printing or something, I think. But yeah, they were allegedly they were the first complete new fleet to be delivered completely in the new colours.
That's an interesting little tidbit.
Yeah,
okay. So they were shipped across and landed on the island in their appropriate livery, and were the first fleet to have been completely. Yeah,
completely.
I suppose it is an easy. It's a fairly easy fleet to paint, given its size, but that's very interesting. What's also quite interesting.
Yeah, it was quite a large fleet though. There were 43 vehicles.
Oh really? Go crikey! Oh, I started 43 vehicles.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, so this is when they were running in seven car formations.
Exactly. Yeah. And in the late 60s, they were running I think 5 trains an hour in the peak summer service. Which
it's like metro capacity. That's providing like impressive capacity. Yeah.
Exactly. They required basically 6-7 car units to run that service, and that's 42 carriages. They only had one spare car.
Crikey, yeah. What's also interesting on this advert, on this little leaflet rather, is that you've got the Southern Vectis Omnibus Company Limited.
Yeah.
So I presume that's the bus company that's running the connections.
That's the bus company that was running the connections to Wroxham and Ventnor.
It's quite something. That's a lovely bit of history. That. So, okay, this next slide, I knew it was coming, and I'm excited by it for a variety of reasons. Number one, we can see in colour what we didn't see in colour in the previous slide. So you can see the lovely yellow end and the BR logo.
Yeah.
You can also see that they've attached what appears to be a top hat to the to the top of this tube car, and they're going through a tunnel.
Yeah, that's obviously how you measure how if a train will fit through a tunnel.
Yeah.
This is Ryde Tunnel. This was 1983, and the management at Ryde had their eyes on the Class 503s, which from Merseyrail, which were about to be made redundant because the 508s were being transferred to Merseyrail.
Yeah.
And management at Ryde thought, well, they might fit. So they stuck a bit of wood on top of one of their standard stock cars, run it through the tunnel.
Yeah. Simple as that, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm told it got all the way to Shanklin.
Yeah, that is interesting. So it is interesting. I presume costs are why they decided not to, but it is. Yeah.
I don't know the exact reason why they decided not to, but cost seems likely. Ryde were very confident that these would fit, although they did recommend certain infrastructure modifications, including to the tunnel. They recommended the tunnel, although it's got twin entrances, most of the tunnel is a single bore. They recommended singling the track, running it through the centre of the single bore, and at the entrances lowering the track. Some people watching this will be aware that the track was raised in the winter of 66-67. That was an anti-flooding measure which hasn't necessarily been very successful. They which obviously, the tunnel was always thought to be a bit restrictive, and obviously once they'd raised the track floor, that made it more restrictive. But these were the recommendations that Ryde put forward in 1983 anyway.
Yeah. It's
BR in the end decided that it would be cheaper, I think, to continue with the old standard stock for a few more years until some tube stock became available.
Yeah. It's Firstly, I'm interested by the fact that they've got a twin entrance, but it becomes single bore. That's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also the fact that they electrified, presumably a pretty decently cost-effective, quick electrification. So is it fourth rail? Is it to match exactly, or have they?
It's third rail.
It is third rail. Okay, so there are some electromechanical modifications that have to happen.
Yes, they did. I don't know why they went for that. I guess it's just the southern region just like to do everything third rail. But yeah, you have to wonder. It's a self-contained system. They could have just put fourth rail down and not converted the trains.
But I suppose it's good because it does offer it does offer an easy switch from mainline stock can run on there, and it's made made a few people's lives a bit easier. Yeah, that is so. The only reason I'm currently looking at, so I did a thread about gauge clearance on the Isle of Wight because it was before the formal announcement of something which I'm not going to spoil yet for any viewers, but the formal announcement of a thing that your slides will cover very briefly, or in a very brief moment. But I did look at this. So looking at the gauge clearance, so it's probably worth saying. So gauge clearance is checking that trains, not just the trains, but the space that trains might fill. Because it's not just the static profile when it's sat stationary, because it does all sorts of movement and suspension, bouncing, construction tolerance when they build the train.
They certainly do on the Isle of Wight.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yes, well, round pebble ballast is not a good idea if you want a stable track form. But that's another story. That's another thing I do know about the Isle of Wight is that the ballast certainly was for a long time was formed of round pebble ballast that they could pick up from the beach.
I think a lot of it still is. I think they stopped using that about 30 years ago, but I think a lot of it's still on shingles.
Bearing in mind that ballast is supposed to form an interlocked matrix to support the track. Have fun forming an interlocked matrix from nice smooth pebbles. But there we are. Gauge clearances. So you have to look at you're looking at the static profile of the vehicle plus vehicle tolerances. So that's things like building it, but also how it's put together. You don't put a train together perfectly. Panels maybe stick out a little bit. Things like wear on the wheels, flanges mean it can move around. And then you've got dynamic movements so where it's going around a curve, maybe it's leaning, or the suspension, kind of bouncing around a bit as it goes around curves, depending on how much lateral force you're balancing. And then, of course, you've got the curve overthrow. So if you've got a curved track, the train essentially gets wider because the middle of the train and the ends of the train, either side of the bogies, stick out more than just directly above the bogie. So all these things factor in and give what's known as a kinematic envelope. Or alternatively, you can just hammer a piece of plywood on top of your train, and that does the analysis just as well.
Yeah, but you mentioned curves. The tunnel does have quite a sharp curve to it, which is possibly a bigger restriction on it than the height.
So looking at this, I mean, it's hard to tell, but it looks like there are check rails additional rails to help sort of stabilise the train. In this picture, it looks like a shiny head of a. I can't quite pick it out. It might just be a pattern in the head of the rail. But on the.
Do you want to flick forward to the next photo?
Oh yeah, I'll do that.
We might be able to see if there's a check rail or not. It's the same location.
I think there is. I think on the 6 foot side of the track, so the one in the middle, there looks to be a second rail essentially. That you can see. In fact, wait a minute. By the magic of television, I can do this and go here. I think, and you can sort of see here. There's a kind of a dark-looking railhead, and then next to it, obviously, you've got the shiny running rail. So I think there is a check rail, which indicates that it's very tight.
Yeah.
So obviously you've got the DCCR here, the third rail, the traction rail here, and you've got the outside rail. And then you've got this, what I would call a continuous check rail. I'm positive there is one here. Continuous check rail here. And obviously down here you've got another DCCR third rail, traction rail. There. Yeah. And in fact you can see even more clearly on the other track here. Yeah, definitely check rail. So that is very tight basically. That's what we can conclude, very tight. So curve overthrow is clearly an issue through the tunnel.
Also through Ryde Esplanade Station, which we just come out of there as well.
So, so when I did this, the reason I brought that up, this is another nice picture actually, showing the new. So this is the 39 stock. So
38 stock.
Sorry, 38. Forgive me.
Yeah.
So this is the older. What did you describe these as?
These are called the standard stock.
Standard stock. Okay.
Yeah. Ironically, there were quite a lot of differences between different batches, so they weren't very standard.
Oh, really? Well, I'm exposing my ignorance. I don't know a huge amount about the London Underground because, well, I've never lived in London, so I've never had to deal with it on the regular. But yeah, so this is a 38 stock.
This is the 38 stock.
Yeah.
As you can see, that looks much more like a modern.
Yeah, much more familiar. And I presume things, basically, the deep tube stock started essentially emulating this once it. Like it feels like a lot of the stuff since then has almost emulated that design.
Very, very much, I think. Yeah, I mean, the standard stock, I think, in some ways were almost the sort of last of the sort of old-fashioned looking tube trains, and the 38 stock were pretty much the first of the new sort of more streamlined looking ones.
I've scribbled all over your lovely picture. Wait a minute, let me.
That's fine. That's fine.
Let me.
Yeah. So. So. Ryde Tunnel. Ryde Tunnel's also not the lowest structure on the line as well.
No, there's an overbridge, so that's what I was going to talk about. Yeah, there's an overbridge that's lower. So when I ran the gauging as part of this, so I did the analysis as part of the thing which we're about to talk about in 1 or 2 slides time.
Yes.
And because a lot of people were saying, oh yeah, there's that particular thing, it'll never fit. So I just thought, well, you know what, that vehicle model exists now because it's running elsewhere in the country, so I'll have a look. And indeed, the tunnel wasn't a problem. The problem was a couple of overbridges. So overbridges, for anyone who's not sure of the nomenclature, an overbridge is a structure that goes over the railway, just like an underbridge is a structure that allows something to go under the railway. So yeah, there are a couple of short overbridges that cause a problem, I think.
Yeah. In fact, there's a story related to overbridges. Is that about a year after they'd done this test with a bit of wood, they got their first Class 03 on the island. The 03s, people might know, did have their roofs cut down a bit on the island, but they didn't arrive with cut down roofs. When the first one arrived, they decided to test that through the tunnel. It seems to be a bit secretive. Not many people seem to have known about it, but it set off one night northwards through the tunnel, no problem at all. Or maybe a bit tight, but it went through the tunnel all the way to the pier, apparently. Coming back through the tunnel, and then almost got stuck under an overbridge. and about a month later, they cut the cab down.
Yeah. Gauging in action. I'd imagine that it was. Yeah, it was one of those situations where the driver is sort of just shrinking, just like shrinking their head down as they approach. Yeah, okay. That just shows, always never assume that the thing that you think is worst in game. All the track engineers out there who are watching this, of which I'm sure there's 1 or 2, always run the gauge of the whole route. Don't just assume that the thing you think is the worst thing, because there's always some other little creature or fiddly bit that's going to cause you a bigger problem. I love that. That's such a good story. You can just imagine them, can't you? Just sheepishly sort of revving the engine to pull this little shunter back out from.
They had to come back out up through the tunnel and down the other line.
Brilliant. So the previous, I'm going to flick back through them. So this one you can see that they're running the standard stock through to try and check if it fits. Yeah. And so what's going? So this image is just.
We've mentioned that the tunnel floor was raised in '67 as well, haven't we?
Yeah, briefly. Yeah. So that was for flooding, which I'm conscious is an issue in a few parts of the railway.
Even since then, it has been known to flood pretty much all the way to the roof. So raising the floor probably didn't make much difference.
So is this? So it's quite a dip. So when they built this, when the mainline companies funded this extension, did essentially the line have to? Did it have to almost dip below sea level to get underneath the town?
It is below sea level, yes. Apparently, the flooding is normally caused not so much, more from the other end, where there's I think it's called the Monkton Mead Brook, runs near the railway, and that if that overflows, it sometimes floods the tunnel and the depot.
But up to the roof?
Not usually up to the roof, but I think it's happened twice this century, and it also happened about 100 years ago as well.
Good grief!
There are photos of the water almost up to the roof.
Yeah, that's going to become a more common feature given the trajectory of the current of sea level and the climate. That's a little scary. Yeah. So But it's a nice picture of showing that actually, apart from the diminutive rolling stock, it looks just like a slightly bedraggled bit of mainline on the mainland. It's a third rail railway. It's two tracks. Yeah, yeah. So this is painted. What livery is this painted in then? This 38 stock in this photo.
Yeah, I mean, originally they were in Network South East livery when they arrived,
Yeah.
and they look very smart and modern. Then eventually, several years after privatisation, they were put into this final livery with sort of cartoon dinosaurs all over the side, which and the Isle of Wight has quite an association with dinosaurs, so they were kind of cashing in on that, but it did kind of draw attention to the fact that the rolling stock was a bit prehistoric.
Yeah,
Probably not a good idea. Eventually, they just went the whole heritage hog, and this is original London Transport livery plus a yellow end.
Oh yeah, okay. Which I'm in two minds about.
Interestingly, being in a heritage livery, they seem to get away with not having contrasting doors.
Oh yeah, okay. That's an interesting one. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought they must be pretty much the only stock on the national network in daily service that doesn't have contrasting doors, I'd have thought.
Yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting image, and it's it is strange seeing such. I mean, 1938, I presume, was the year that design is originating from.
These were built in about 3940, I think. So they really are 80 years old.
Yeah, which is quite something. So if I flick to the next image, so hopefully I've described that suitably. Tell me off, podcasters, if I haven't. Then there's this thing.
Yes, now that's a CGI image.
It is.
We're recording this, I think, on the 16th of September. It was exactly 12 months ago today, that the announcement was made that the island was getting big investment in its railway, including a new fleet of trains, and it's the Viva Rail Class 484.
Yeah, and it's exciting.
It's very exciting.
And it actually looks better than this render. Just to point out, the render looks a little bit rendery. Actually, the stock has been I think the stock is out in this livery. I've seen it. I think it's been bashing around, or it's very close to it. And certainly the liveried sort of this family of the Viva Rail family, they look terrific. I think they look great. Yeah. I'm in two minds about the refurb, but I don't know. They're a solid bit of stock, and actually I think it's a sensible interim. There's a huge amount more of this stock they can play with, and actually it's also giving them a sounding bed for new build stock. Viva Rail have plans for new build stock as well, following a lot of the stuff they've learned using this platform. So by not having to develop an item of rolling stock, it's given them a chance to spend a lot of R&D money on the ancillaries and be very clever with some of those, which they can then use on new build stuff. So it's quite interesting. The whole project, the Viva Rail project, is interesting. And I was about to say it in the previous slide, and then I delayed it to this one. I'm in two minds about the heritage livery on the 38 stock, because the reality is that the Isle of Wight can deserve and should deserve a modern railway system running on it.
Yes.
And really putting a heritage livery is a bit, it's sort of a heritage railway, is it? Actually you want this to be appealing to people to use as their, to own as their own modern railway system for them to travel around on.
Definitely, yeah. It's interesting, back in the 60s, obviously I did research my book, people were not at all nostalgic about their old steam trains. A lot of the islanders wanted the line to be modernised back in the 60s. Of course, they weren't so pleased when they heard that modernisation would mean 40-year-old tube trains. But...
Yeah, I'll bet. So there's actually, alongside the new rolling stock being introduced, there's a fair amount of infrastructure work being proposed as well, I think.
Yes, because the obvious thing to say about district line trains is they're not tube trains.
No, they're subsurface line trains.
Subsurface, yes. It means they're basically full-size trains, and they've already started, I think, lowering the track under some of the overbridges, as we've mentioned.
Yeah.
And they're going to be relaying the worst sections of track, I believe. They're not relaying the whole line. They've already sent a tamper over there, and there's a 3-month closure coming up from January through to March, which is exactly what happened in 1967.
Really? Okay. So it's good. So it's good news, and it sounds like is the plan that they're going to run? Are they going to slightly increase speeds, or run? Or is it more about infrastructure reliability? Do you think?
Yeah. Well, actually, if we move on to the next slide.
Yeah, go for it. So just as for anyone who isn't, I'll do a bit of an audio description. So yeah, this is, as we said, this is a Viva Rail D stock. It's a Class 484. I think the first D stock that was running, or the D train as it's being called by Viva Rail, it was the 320. I think the Class 320 that was running. No, not 320, 230.
230.
The 230. Forgive me. But it's a family of stock based on the aluminium-bodied D stock, which is, because it's built of aluminium, it was in remarkably good condition. The actual Viva Rail story is fascinating, and at some point we will get Viva Rail on for a rail natter, actually, because I think the whole story is absolutely fascinating. And it's looking quite smart here in a mocked-up Island Line livery, but I think it looks even better.
Yes.
They've at the front of this render looks a bit flat, but actually it's got a bit more plastic and looks quite smart. I think it looks quite good. In the final built version. Anyway, right, next slide.
Okay.
Here we are at
grading.
Okay,
We're at
yeah.
grading. This photo, I'm stood there on platform 2 at grading, which you'll notice there's no track.
Yeah.
Grading. The Network Southeast took the track up in late 80s when they singled the line between Brading and Sandown. The reason I'm there is you can get to it if you go on this tour of the restored signal box.
Okay.
They take you over the footbridge, they take you in the signal box, and then they take you around to platform 2 as well. Now, Network Southeast at the time were running 3 trains an hour, 20-minute interval service. So they didn't need anything to pass at Brading. But within a few years, that dropped down to 2 trains an hour. Brading's the midway point. Because they couldn't pass at Brading, they couldn't run even half-hour service. So for the last almost 30 years, they've been running a 20-40-minute interval service.
Which is rubbish, frankly.
Which is rubbish, yeah. They either pass at Sandown or they pass on the double-track section that runs between Smallbrook and the Esplanade. So for ever since before privatisation, people have been talking about putting a loop in at Brading, and finally that is what they're going to do. So platform 2 at Brading should be back
reinstated. Excellent.
Yeah.
There's the P-way. The track's looking in slightly less good condition here. BR1 base plates and spikes, but it's probably fine. I'm sure if they might well end up digging the lot out and replacing the lot, but we'll see.
I think they're going to have to adjust the platform heights at probably all the stations. Brading, if you look closely there, Brading is one of the ones where the platform height is not at tube level. You actually at the moment you step down from the platform into the train. Some of the other platforms are at probably most of the others are at tube level. But they'll probably all be too low for the new stock. So
hopefully, anyone who's watching, it's probably a bit late now because all the designs will be submitted. I hope you're putting the platform to a compliant position so that we're not locking in inaccessibility. Hopefully, it'll mean that after all the work, there'll be a more accessible railway system for everyone.
They're certainly implying that they're going to be doing that. They talked about adjusting platform heights and I mean they're going to have wheelchair spaces on the new trains. So they certainly talked about step-free access, I think. So
good, long overdue. I noticed there's a card reader. Is the whole system on? Is that a card reader in the? Let me get me pen out. This here.
I don't know.
There's a card reader. That's interesting.
I think I took this photo. I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, but.
Oh, crikey! I wonder what it is.
It's part of SWR. Well, no, SWT as they were then. Yeah. Card readers, it might be.
Right, comments under the YouTube video. Put your comments in. Tell us about what that is. Richard and I will learn and find out why there's a card reader there. Exposing my ignorance once again. So
I'm sure if they don't have card readers already, I'm sure they'll probably be putting them in. They're talking about putting in Wi-Fi and all sorts of things.
Oh, good. Well, it's just basically turning it into an actual, I say modern railway, a modern railway from 10, 15 years ago when Wi-Fi should have been standard at that point. Just as a point of interest, because we're talking about platforms. platforms. This is a nightmare for me as a track engineer. Let's do a slightly darker colour. This here is an absolute nightmare. So this is where you've got these stones on the edge of the platform are called coping stones. Just like you have on all sorts of masonry and brick structures. You've got a coping stone that goes on the top. Well, we call these copers on the platform, and we prefer to have in here, rather than this square shape, we prefer to have a shape that looks more like this, where you've got the coping stone and then it kind of cuts in, and then you have that shape, and you have this sort of space here that basically if someone falls down here, there's a sort of a safe space, kind of this recess under the platform. And not having that is a real pain, but also it makes it really hard for us to adjust the platform to be compliant to position. So you'll see a lot of flush platforms on the southern across the southern region, across the former southern region, and they're a real pain. And they're normally on the inside of the curve as well, which is even more problematic because often the inside of the curve, the track kind of slides down the hill a bit, so it often gets close to the platform, and you then want to readjust it anyway. So there's some insight for people who are interested about platform corrections, which is a discipline in and of itself. This is hard. Anyway, there we are. Sorry, I'm just hijacking your history talk there, Richard.
No, that's fine. That's probably what I wanted to say about braiding, mainly that they're putting the loop in. They'll be running a half-hourly service. They haven't mentioned anything about taking out the loop at Sandown or taking out the double track section further up the line. So
interesting.
Maybe that, because in theory you could just have a loop at braiding and everything else just a single track, but maybe they want to allow for 8 running trains to pass, or maybe they
could have peak plans
maybe they're future proofing it in case they want to run 20-minute interval in the future.
COVID notwithstanding, it's a good idea to have a little bit of resilience in your railway system.
Yeah, as what Network South East didn't do.
Yes, we've so much of our railway network has been kind of the opposite of future-proofed, where we've that word rationalised. We've rationalised it as we did through the late 70s, but mostly in the 80s and a lot in the early 90s. We were still doing it, rationalising. And it's fine up until the point where you realise that actually passenger numbers are growing and there needs to be more freight as well, and then you're stuck because you can only if you restrict your infrastructure so that you can only run the timetable at the point where you've decided to restrict your infrastructure, you really are stuck. So it's a good idea for them not to get rid of those loops. Anyway, right, there we go. That was nice. This is interesting. So this is a picture of the real thing.
Yeah, this is one of the photos that was released recently of the 484s under construction, as it were. This is 001, and by the time this video goes up on YouTube, that might be on the island.
Ooh, that'll be good.
Supposedly the first one goes over this month.
Really? Okay. Yeah. So this goes out on. Well, today, hello everyone. Today is the 23rd of October, except that it isn't. It's the 16th of September. But so it might well be running. That's exciting. Or
it won't be in service.
Pushing back and forward, seeing if it fits, and generally doing trials. Yeah. Or it might have just landed and be sat there, sort of looking shiny.
Yeah. Because of changing platform heights and other things,
there's a lot more to be done.
The new and old trains are not going to run side by side. The old ones will struggle on to the end of this year, although they are struggling to seem to be struggling. They've only got 2 working units at the moment, and they need 2 units to run a service. So if one fails, then they're down to one train an hour.
Yeah,
which happens quite a lot.
Yeah. 80-year-old trains. It's not a good idea to run 80-year-old trains for a mainline service.
I think the problem is getting spare parts for 80-year-old trains.
Yeah, the redundancy has got to be like the part redundancy. If you think the part redundancy is pretty bad on a Class 91 locomotive from the late 80s, the redundancy on essentially it's steam era kit. So getting hold of getting hold of some of those electromechanical bits and pieces is probably an absolute nightmare, if it's even possible. I love this. This is a great image. They're all working hard. The Viva Rail team working hard. I'm excited to see those running. I think it'll be great. It's a proper railway service. Okay, so the train, the body shells are older, but pretty much everything you see in that image, other than the body shell, is brand new. It's a really interesting project. We'll definitely talk more about that in a future Rail Natter. Yeah, that's great. I love that. You can see one. You can see one propped up in the background, having some work done to it.
Yes, yeah. They're only ordering 5 units, 5 2-car units, which, well, when you consider how many vehicles they had back in the 60s.
Yeah, that's still a bit of a poxy number of units. It's a shame.
Yeah.
That's an issue I have with the massive procurement of rolling stock we've had recently is how many 2-car trains we've still been procuring. Like the economies of scale of a 3-car or a 4-car certainly a 3-car compared to a 2-car, surely just get the 3-car, and likewise with 3-car to 4-car. There's so many across the north. We've had Pacers that were 2-car, and we're replacing them with 2 or 3-car Pacers even, and we're replacing them with 2-car Class 195s, which is doolally to me. These trains are always full, and if they're not, it's fine. Just run a slightly bigger train. It's much less operationally complicated than mixing and matching.
On the Isle of Wight, I mean, if the 5 units are all, well, provided 4 of the 5 units are working, they would have the potential to run 4-car trains, which is what they once used to do with the 38 stock in the summer months. Well, obviously a 4-car train would be double the capacity of what they've got now. Although I think even a 2-car train would be more capacity than what they've got now. These supposedly got more capacity, I believe.
What's the seating arrangement inside the 38 stock? Is it?
Well, it's what you'd expect for a tube train.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a lot of longitudinal benches.
Some is in like bays and some is longitudinal. That's how you describe it. Yeah. It's similar to what's on the Bakerloo line now, for example.
Yeah. Anyway, so the fleet it would be nice if they'd thought about slightly longer trains, but it is an improvement. It is good. There is investment. There is a positive looking future for the railways on the Isle of Wight, which is good. Okay. The next slide is where you get to do is the plug stuff one. There we are.
Yeah, and this is an ideal Christmas gift.
Yeah, that's it. The Ryde Rail, the history of tube trains on the Isle of Wight.
Yeah. This is my book. It originally came out last year, a couple of months before the Viva Rail announcement, although I do mention Viva Rail in it because it was becoming fairly obvious by then that it was going to be Viva Rail. And it was reprinted early this year with an update covering the announcement from last autumn, so it is fairly up to date. But it begins with the beaching era, and that's the whole history since then.
And there's a standard stock looking quite smart in its southeast livery. Actually,
in its final years, in fact. Yeah.
That's nice. No, so everyone, let's. I'll put a link in the description so you can go on Amazon or search it and find use your favorite ethical book purchasing sites. It's fun. I'll tell you what I'm going to click this button here because we can see each other in larger form. Hello. That's Richard. That's been absolutely fascinating. You know what's good is that's 52 minutes, so we've kept it under the hour, which is remarkable. Because there is always the risk that in these Rail Natters that things escalate wildly. No, that's been brilliant. Thank you so much. Anything else you wanted to say? Did we cover all the bits and pieces? I think we.
I think we did. Yeah. I mean, you'll know that there's been talk about feasibility studies into extensions, but it is only money for feasibility studies, so probably not going to happen. Yeah, the consideration.
I think people were talking about, it was part of the big reverse beaching tranche of discussion, which I despise as a thing. Frequent Rail Natter watchers will know that I despise the use of beaching generally as a descriptor. But anyway, it would be nice if it did reopen, but I think... I mean, the things they're looking at are either reopening to Ventnor, which has been looked at a lot over the years, but it would cost a huge amount of money, mainly getting through Wroxall, the village halfway between Shankton and Ventnor, where there used to be a station, because the track bed's been partly built over there. The feasibility study in the 90s recommended actually building a tunnel through Park Wroxall, which would have cost millions of pounds, and it wouldn't. I don't think it would be nice for the people of Ventnor, but I don't think it would generate a huge amount of money. I think it's one of those things where, like, for me, as much as I want the railways are public service, and it'd be good to extend it to Ventnor because Ventnor's a large. But in the key issues are shortages of government attention, local authority capacity, and engineers, and there are other priorities, you'd say, for the railways, even just in the southeast. You'd say there are other priorities for those limited resources of government attention span, local authority capacity, and engineers. So you'd focus on some of the other, there are other projects that you'd look at.
And the other extension they're looking at is through to Newport, but that effectively is extending the steam railway. It's difficult to see how that could be integrated with Island Line in any way.
Yeah, from an operational perspective, that it almost requires an additional fleet, doesn't it, to run?
Well, I think any extension would require more than just the 5 units. But I mean, at the moment, I guess at the moment, Viva Rail have got plenty of vehicles. They could put an add-on order in.
Yeah, I think they're charging forward at full capacity. They'd have to definitely ramp up if anyone asked them for more stock. I think they're quite busy over it. Well, they're moving. I think they're moving from where they are currently at Long Marston. They're moving over to where are they moving to? I can't remember. They are moving site though, which is interesting. Anyway, right, Richard, that's been brilliant. I've enjoyed that. I'll do my normal before we disappear. I'll do my normal ads. So let's go over here. So I've updated my podcast line. Yeah, we're available on multiple podcasting platforms. For all those who've listened, thanks for listening. Sorry if this is not a format designed for audio only, and yet we have quite a substantial audio only listening. So it's lovely of you to join us. So yeah, Apple, Google, Spotify, that one, and then this new one that I can't remember the name of that one either, but it's also quite good apparently, and it's got a nice colour theme, so that's nice. And also. Oh yes, this thing. So Patreon. Thanks for everyone who supports me on Patreon. Doing that allows you to choose future episodes, themes, and guests. You get lots of. I mean, I say exclusive. It's not hugely exciting. You just get sneak peeks of some of the stuff that's coming up, and you get some interesting chat on the Discord. You get exclusive benefits on there, whatever Discord is. Cool young people know about it. I do not. And also, you get generally just asked inane questions by me. Go into the Discord where there's some good chat about careers. There's some interesting chat about. There's all sorts of interesting chats going on there. There are about 200 people now on the Rail Natter Discord. I've no idea what it is, but it seems to be constantly busy, so that's nice. And if you don't fancy doing any of that, but you do want to sort of show a little bit of support if you enjoyed this, then feel free to PayPal me a bit, and it'll help me to fund a microphone, which I'm going to have arriving fairly soon. So that's my advert bit. Next week, except that it isn't next week, it's in a month and a week, so I need to think about it by then, is episode 33, Would a Fixed Link to Northern Ireland Work? That should be quite an interesting one. Lots of people have been talking about it. Bojo has been every now and then he raises it as a way to sort of suggest that he cares about the Northern Ireland remotely, which he doesn't. So that might be quite interesting. I've had a few suggestions, and in fact quite a lot of info coming through from various people with some like old plans about what it might actually practically look like. And so I'm going to investigate those and sort of put my engineering brain on in overdrive and see if any of them would actually physically work or indeed make any sense. So that should be interesting. I don't know if you've got much thought on a fixed link to Ireland, but given the Isle of Wight is pretty close and doesn't have a fixed link. The Isle of Wight, there was talk of a rail tunnel 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago. That didn't come to anything. There is a campaign over there now for a road fixed link, but I'm not sure it's. I'm not sure it's very popular either. It's just
no.
If you're going to do a fixed link to anything, it should be a rail fixed link because we want to be dissuading people from driving everywhere. Anyway, yeah, that's by the by. Richard, that's been brilliant. Yeah. I've really enjoyed that. I hope you have.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks everyone for joining. Sorry it wasn't live, but if you've got questions for myself or Richard, let's face it, Richard's the interesting person on this episode. Tweet him actually. You can tweet at rlonguk. You find Richard on Twitter and ask him any questions. I'm sure he'd be happy to answer. That's been brilliant. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, listeners and viewers. And we'll see you next time. Cheerio.
Bye bye.